Hello, everybody. This is Tom Eckert here. You're listening to my podcast, Numerology, a GPS for the Soul. This is your place to learn about the true power of numerology and how to use it to bring out the best in yourself, understand your loved ones better, take wise decisions, and prepare for your future. In other words, how to live your life aligned with your true destiny. Take your time to educate yourself and share these podcasts with your friends and family so they too can enjoy the great benefits of numerology. Enjoy! Hello there and welcome to all my listeners. Wow, what an exciting episode awaits us today. We're going to talk about none other than the Arrows of Pythagoras, sometimes known as the Lines of Pythagoras. And we're going to explore the energetics of the 20th and the 21st centuries based on this very unique methodology. But before anything else, if you're new here, first of all, welcome. In this podcast, we discuss numerology as a path for inner transformation, spiritual growth, self-understanding. I personally attempt to make numerology accessible, applicable, and grounded for everyday life matters, so you can actually use this knowledge to apply numerology in order to live a better life, more conscious, and more aligned with your soul and your true purpose. And I'm also very happy to announce my Black Friday offer if you're not already aware of it. So if you wish to take a deeper dive into numerology, I want you to check out my self-study numerology course, which you can now get for 25% off until November 30th, 2024. This course allows you to learn the fundamentals of numerology in a comprehensive way and at your own pace on your laptop, on your tablet, or mobile device. All you need to do is use the coupon code BLACKFRIDAY24, all capital letters, upon checkout. The link to the purchase page is provided in the episode description, so go ahead and check it out. Now, a few other ways you can dive deeper into numerology. First of all, you can book a numerology reading with me. In a reading, you can ask any question that is burning in your life and get precise answers. You can also read more about my readings and the types of readings that I offer and contact me through the link in the episode description to book your reading with me. And if you want to take a real deep plunge and take numerology to the next step, perhaps professionally, you can sign up to my complete path or certification from beginner to numerology expert and get certified as a professional numerologist. To read more about everything, just check out the links in the episode description. So our numerology chart is complex and rich, made up of many segments that eventually intersect, just like the organs of our body. Now, one such unique section that is highly important yet not often talked about is the Arrows of Pythagoras. The Arrows of Pythagoras are energetic planes derived from our date of birth. And they reveal deep and fundamental elements, tendencies, potentials, strengths, and weaknesses that are structural and inborn. Visually speaking, you will usually see a table divided in 9 equal blocks or squares, each one occupying a number from 1 to 9. Now, the meaning of the numbers in this particular methodology is not exactly the same as the meaning we are all familiar with when we're speaking of life path number, expression number, soul urge, etc. It requires a study on its own. You have to get familiar with these meanings. Yet it is a fundamental part of who we are and leaves an undeniable impact on our numerology chart and consequently our life. Now, on this table of numbers, we have 8 active and 8 passive energetic planes. When I teach my in-depth numerology students, I call it full and empty planes. All in all, we have 16 active planes, and that includes the active, or we can say the full, or the empty, or the active or passive, whichever way you want to call it. So each plane, when full, constitutes of 3 numbers. Just for example, we have the 147, we have the 258, or 159. Now, same goes for the empty plane, only that here, all 3 numbers are absent. Now, only when all numbers are either present or absent, we call this an active plane. And that's very interesting, right? Even when all the numbers in a particular plane are not present or absent, it's an active plane. So what's so fascinating about, the arrows of Pythagoras is that not only can you analyze an individual person, but also generational trends. And that's what I'm going to attempt to do in this episode. Now, more specifically, I want to speak about the 20th century and how it was reflected in the arrows of Pythagoras, and then compare it to the 21st century and how it is reflected there. I want to talk about the planes that were and are more present in these centuries and what that tells us about these times, some of the strengths and weaknesses of each time, and so on. Now, please take into account that I'm no historian, nor a politician, no political persona. Let's put it that way. So my knowledge in these fields is very minimal. I am simply trying to make general observations and will certainly not have the ability to provide an actual summary of these complex and rich scenarios. These are really broad strokes, attempting to show meaningful trends, okay, and how they are reflected in the arrows of Pythagoras. So let's dive into the 20th century. Now, one thing that is undeniable about the 20th century is that all people who were born in it have, or at least always have, a 1 and a 9 in their arrows of Pythagoras. Remember that this chart is derived from the date of birth. So anybody born in 19 something something, right, will always have 1, 9. So that means that one of the most active planes during that century was always the 159, sometimes also known by the name the arrow of determination. This means that the energies of this plane, both light and shadow, were exceptionally active during these 100 years, affecting our society in tremendous ways. Now, would I say that about any plane? That it would affect us in tremendous ways? Well, no, not really. Every plane is meaningful and will show its effects for sure, but not all are equally powerful and noticeable. For example, in the 16th century, right, the most common and active plane was the 147, and or is it the 17th century? Forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm talking about like the 1700. Right? So you had 17 always, and then the most active plane would have been 147. And so even though I'm sure I can find historical evidence to support, this plane's dominance during those times, the 1700s, I still hold that the 159 is a much more powerful plane and truly stands out energetically. And this is why I truly want to speak, about the 20th century. So what are we looking at? With the 159, I want you to imagine an arrow being shot at a target and letting nothing stand in its way. Literally going all the way from 1 to 9 as an image, right? All the way from the beginning to the end. In other words, a very fiery, determined, powerful energy capable of achieving incredible things and letting nothing stop it achieving its dreams. The energetic plane 159 is a plane of great achievements and great ambitions. It shoots for greatness and big goals and is also not afraid to take risks. So, in its strength, it is unstoppable. It is brave and sometimes even fearless. It has great willpower and loves to gallop ahead and make things happen. Now, I won't be speaking about the MT 159 because nobody has had it in the 20th century, which again is very telling about that particular block of 100 years. This is by and large what I said so far, I believe a pretty good description of the energetics, okay, or the sort of the landscape of this unique plane, the 159. As for its shadow sides, I'll get to that in a bit. So let's talk a bit about the positives of the 20th century and see how that plane, played its role. Now, when you look at the 20th century, being, basically guided mainly by people with a strong 159 energy, we witnessed an industrial and technological advancement like no other in the history of humanity, at least the recorded history. Leaps and leaps of development. The whole paradigm of science shifted. Great things we never would have imagined possible started happening. And I mean literally, right? Flying on airplanes, flying into space. I mean, these are things we just take for granted today. Landing on the moon, the use of radio, the internet, television. I mean, antibiotics. Guys, we take it so for granted. Computers, cell phones, the discovery of nuclear power, and so on and so forth. I could go on and on. Now, some will say, hey, Tom, but this is only speeding up in the 21st century. And yes, it is. I'm not going to deny it. But these huge leaps revolutionized the entire way we moved as a species when they took place. This is where the greatest leaps all started, like exponential leaps. Not to mention, by the way, another point, that many of the people who are still leading the world today in the 21st century are still people from the 20th century, born with the 1-9 in their Arrows of Pythagoras. So this means that still a lot of the 159 energy is still moving our world forward. Now, these advancements are simply unprecedented. And if you really try to put yourself in the shoes of someone born, on say 80, 90, and living 100 years until 1990, right? Seeing a machine, a tube fly for the first time in the sky, then carrying people from continent to continent. Guys, I mean, this was unimaginable. It was unimaginable, right? The whole sort of like myth of Icarus, or I hope I'm pronouncing it well in English, right? But right, this whole like the sin of going to the skies, or it's not, something that should never, really happen, or right, it's some kind of hubris or whatever. No, we were who would have imagined we'll be able to fly? It was a tremendous quantum leap. And again, today we take it for granted, but just imagine this was not possible and somebody dared to try it out. right? And then being able to hear and see people who are not even physically there, with radio and TV broadcasting visuals and sounds from other countries on the globe and be connected to the rest of the world. Guys, this is wild. This is really, really wild if you put yourself in those shoes. Not to mention the internet that came on later and what that opened up. I mean, that's just like, you know, took everything up 10 notches, right? So, and even cars, even cars. Yes, the concept and perhaps like the prototype was invented before, like at the end of the 19th century, around like 1885. But truly speaking, cars became a real part of daily life only in the 20th century. And boy, did that change everything, just everything. So just imagine what it was for that person to digest all of these unbelievable changes. Today, and this is another important point, it's easier for us to imagine the unimaginable because we are already used to technology advancing in unbelievable speeds. But back in the day, that wasn't the case. That's where the 159 like kicked in. It was a quantum leap after quantum leap. So you can really see the 159 and how it simply gathered everything we knew up to that point and achieved, and sort of like took it all the way, right? Again, from 1 to 9 into like this full bloom, a complete revolution. So now, I mean, now don't get me wrong, it's not that we didn't make some very powerful and meaningful discoveries in the earlier centuries. We certainly did. And indeed, for 1,000 years, let's not forget, everyone had at least one time number one in their arrows chart. And that indeed lends to discovery and the spirit of discovery and revolution. But it wasn't until the 20th century, right, that the entire 159 was fully activated for an entire 100 years as a form of culmination, a peak, and brought everything into this great fruition. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, so far so good. But what about the flip side of the 20th century? What about the shadow that I promised you? So, in the 20th century alone, we had two devastating world wars. And in general, my friends, the 20th century was by far the most murderous century recorded in human history, with an unimaginable number of approximately 187 million deaths. Again, just like try to wrap your head around this number. It was the equivalent of about 10% of the world's population at that time. And I'm referring here more to the earlier part of the century, okay? Now, why am I mentioning war? Because when the 159 plane goes shadow, we see tremendous anger, rage, and an attitude of demolishing whatever stands in one's way. It can be a very aggressive plane. And indeed, despite all the horrendous atrocities humanity has always seen and experienced, I truly think the 20th century was a Guinness World Record, and not in a nice way on that regard, in that way. Now, furthermore, the 20th century marked the beginning of the greatest large scale deforestation and industrial pollution, leading to a large scale environmental degradation. Again, we see this 159 moving in on things with the approach of the end justifies the means. I want to make money, therefore I'll simply destroy nature, and so on, right? Like I'll just shave off this entire forest because I can make more money. I don't know, whatever, draw more oil and resources. And again, of course, guys, as I said, like I'm not a political persona or a historian or anybody that has like a very, very deep understanding in all these processes, but I'm really oversimplifying it here, okay? I know it's not that simple. As it was also a way of, generating energy, for example. We need resources, we need trees for heating, and so on and so forth. But still, like this sort of like this mass production, right? That sort of, as I said, like shaves off an entire forest, sometimes without really caring for the consequences. You see what I'm saying? And so you can see the violent side of the 159 at work. There are, of course, more things I could talk about, for example, the Spanish flu and so on that killed like, I don't know, I think like around 50 million people. Forgive me if I'm, getting the numbers wrong, but, we're talking about like tens of millions, okay? But I think I've said enough to sort of like, bring across this shadow intensity of the 159 and how it played out, both in people and in events. Yeah, so right, I've said enough about the 20th century to sort of demonstrate the workings of the 159. And I feel we are ready to move on and explore the 21st century and how it affected the arrows of Pythagoras. But before I keep talking any further, if you're enjoying this podcast and you want to keep learning more grounded, applicable, high quality numerology, make sure to click the follow or subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell on the platform you're listening from and become part of my numerology community, my friends. Also, make sure to check out the comment section and leave a comment on an episode you liked, share your thoughts, and even ask questions. It's your opportunity to connect with me directly, to share your thoughts, and I will always attempt to answer as many comments as I possibly can. If you don't see the comment section on the platform you're listening from, the safest way to do so is either on Spotify or via YouTube. Having said that, let's keep going. The 21st century. Now, there are two things that really stand out and are equally important to understand about the transition to the 21st century in relation to the arrows of Pythagoras. First and foremost, we shifted from 1,000 years era of a leading number 1 to a completely new millennium with a leading number 2. This is huge and has brought about many changes and will bring many more to come. Secondly, people born from the year 2000 onwards for the next 100 years until 2100 or the 22nd century will have mainly a 2 energy in their arrows. And as a result, will leave many empty planes. That will change in 2100, since for at least 100 years, everyone will have at least 2 numbers in their arrows. This was the same, by the way, in the first 200 years, in the year 1000, until everyone arrived to the year 1200. Right? So there were 200 years where only ones were in the chart. Either it was the year 1000 or 1100, it was still 1 and 1. So the chart did not have enough numbers. It's only in the year 1200 that people started having 2 numbers. And then, by the way, at that time, the 1, 2, 3 plane was the most active. Now, what does all of this tell us? Firstly, it tells us that a lot of energy is going to be concentrated around the 2 energy in the arrows chart. And that will be a massive change of motive and outlook on life for all of us. Secondly, it tells us that we will see a lot of deficit in important planes like 159, 369, 147, and so on. Things are somehow shifting, but at least temporarily in a rather lopsided manner. The energy as a whole becomes much more subtle for better and for worse. And I'm going to cover both. But before I say anything, I want just to maybe help you because I'm talking about many planes and numbers, and I don't want you to get confused. I highly recommend if you're not driving um, and you can take a pen and paper, just draw this chart, right? And try to picture it, like just position the numbers in their allocated, slots and try to see it visually so you understand what I'm talking about. That will really help you understand. So let's speak about some of the positives we should expect in the 21st century. Uh, but first and foremost, since we are still in the earlier stages of the 21st century, we don't have the full perspective, right? And much of what I'll be saying is speculative. What we can see so far is how emotional values became increasingly more important, how alternative medicine became a very popular part of medical care, how meditation and yoga became not only a widely known concept, but a widely used practice, even in high-tech companies. Not to mention how therapy, became very prevalent and the feeling that one can allow themselves to open up emotionally. This fits very well with the two energy leading the way in the arrows chart. We are becoming increasingly more aware of our interconnectedness and also how we create damage to our surroundings, as well as the wish to fix that. Again, I'm not suggesting that everything I'm stating here was quote unquote invented in the 21st century, but it definitely took a distinct quantum leap. Furthermore, it tells us that we will be seeing a generation emerging that will be much more connected to their emotions, to what does them good, to their inner resources. They will be able to sense much better than previous generations what makes them happy and content, and possibly wish to slow things down a bit and focus more on self nourishment rather than constant achievement and forward galloping. But it's not all a bed of roses. In fact, this new emerging generation, the oldest of whom is 24 at the time of recording this episode. So, right, so this new generation, as mentioned earlier, will have many more empty planes. Now, I'm sort of like shifting here into the shadow. This means that many of them will be more drawn into themselves and less to the external world. Now, this may lead to a problem of not being able to connect the inner with the outer very well. For example, feeling strong things, even intuiting strong things, but having like a very broken, weak, and immature connection with what's actually happening in life and the world. For example, having strong ideals or feelings about a particular topic, but having no real connection to it in real life. A little bit like living in a fantasy world. They may be very, very sensitive, sometimes not knowing how to deal with such a fast paced world. A lot will be centered on how they feel, as if that is the most important thing in the world, as if there is not actual reality out there, no objective truth, but only the truth of one's emotions. Now, as a collective, we can already feel and see that happening with, for example, with information. We are in a time where it's really hard to tell truth from lie. Everything has become very, very subjective and muddled, right? With the leading one energy of earlier times, at least there was a sense of sharpness and some form of clarity. Now, everything becomes very, very nebulous, at least for the time being. Now, of course, please listen to everything I say with perspective. I'm drawing very broad strokes here. I'm making generalizations. Naturally, not everyone will be this way, and we will also see many bright, sensitive, intuitive, and caring people emerging in this generation, marked and led by the two energy and the amazing sensitivity of many empty planes. They will potentially lead the world to a kinder future, leaning on cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable resources. Again, the two energy is a lot about inner resources, but that will, of course, also translate to world resources. Now, it's important to note that not all transitions between the numbers is that sharp, like the shift from a leading one to a leading two. And so, as we acclimate ourselves to this new millennium, and I believe we'll need until about the end of the century, give or take, to fully settle in. Um, so, as we acclimate ourselves, I believe we are about to witness some unfathomable changes for the good. I think it won't be what we imagine as a golden age, as it is depicted in the New Age scene, but truly a fundamental shift of interests that will bring about global abundance, first and foremost, as energy, um, free energy, or almost free resources for all, and also clean resources. Something about the shift into the two energy will bring about a calmer, energetic climate in the long run. Now, we are still experiencing the birth pangs, so don't get too excited about world events right now. People are super excited going into like this tunnel vision. We have to look at things from a broader perspective. It's very normal and even to be expected that things are sort of like topsy-turvy right now. Again, we're acclimating ourselves to a tectonic shift. It is really a tectonic shift between the century. But in fact, this time around, it's not just a shift between centuries, my friends. It's a shift between millenniums. This is a whole epoch we're shifting into. So just like brace yourselves, or relax into this. It's just the shifts we're seeing, we have to take them with proportion. There will be some setbacks until we settle fully in that new two energy. The momentum generated in the 20th century will be transformed slowly but surely in the wisdom of the two energy and will be used to lead us into a healthier future. That's my take, at least. So, this episode really stands out in the sense that it speaks to a part of the numerology chart that I rarely mention here because it is very complex and also not often spoken of in numerology books, and also embodies different numerical meanings and significations. But in all honesty, I think numerology would not be complete without having a good grasp on the arrows of Pythagoras. It's advanced material, but very powerful and potent. It is something I teach my in depth numerology students in their third stage course, just before getting certified as numerologists. So I do hope that this episode, helped activate a different lens, right? Through which you can see how numerology views the generational changes and world events through this unique method of the arrows of Pythagoras. Again, it's all broad strokes, but frankly speaking, sometimes that's all we need in order to gain perspective and wisdom. We don't need to dive into the details. That's not where we actually gain perspective. So I hope it really inspires you and just keeps you hungry for more and more numerology. Talking of which, I want to remind you that you can get my self-study numerology course for 25% off for Black Friday and learn the fundamentals of numerology in a comprehensive manner at your own pace, from any device. Simply use the coupon code Black Friday 24, all capital letters, upon checkout. And of course, remember to check out my in-depth numerology certification studies if you want to take that a step deeper, if you really want to acquire mastery of numerology. And before we wrap this up, if you have enjoyed this podcast and want to keep learning more grounded, in-depth, high-quality numerology, make sure to click that follow or subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell on the platform you're listening from and become part of my numerology community. Remember also to check out the comment section. Leave a comment, my friends. I want to hear from you, and I promise to try and answer all the comments. If you don't see a comment section on the platform you're listening from, just go ahead to Spotify or YouTube. There you can write a comment for sure. And of course, don't forget to check out my professional numerology readings. One hell of an experience, I promise. Okay, my friends, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was great food for thought, opened a whole new dimension for you. And I'll be very curious to hear what you think about it and perhaps what you want to hear me speaking of in upcoming episodes pertaining to the Arrows of Pythagoras. So make sure to write me. And as always, I'll see you in the next episodes. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, and you want to go deeper into numerology, check out my website, tom-eckert.com. You can also book a numerology reading or even study numerology yourself through my courses. I'll see you in the next episode.